Dreams of Trespass, Chapter 3. The French Harem. Our house gate was a definite hudud, or frontier, because you needed permission to step in or out. Every move had to be justified, and even getting to the gate was a procedure. If you were coming from the courtyard, you had to first walk down an endless corridor, and then you came face to face with Ahmed, the doorkeeper, who was usually sitting on his throne-like sofa, always with his tea tray by his side, ready to entertain. Since the rite of passage always involved a rather elaborate negotiating process, you were invited either to sit beside him or his impressive sofa, or to face him, duly relaxed on the out-of-place fauteuil de France. His hard, shabby, upholstered easy chair that he had picked out for himself on a rare visit to the Jotia or local flea market. Ahmed often had the youngest of his 5 children on his lap, because he took care of them whenever his wife Luza went to work. She was a first-rate cook and accepted occasional assignments outside our home when the money was good. Our house gate was a gigantic stone arch with impressive carved wooden doors. It separated the women's harem from the male strangers walking in the streets. Uncles and fathers' honor and prestige depended on that separation, we were told. Children could step out of the gate if their parents permitted it, but not grown-up women. I would wake up at dawn, Mother would say, now and then, if I only could go out for a walk in the early morning when the streets are deserted. The light must be blue then, or maybe pink, like at sunset. What is the color of the morning in the deserted, silent streets? No one answered her question. In a harem, you don't necessarily ask questions to get answers. You ask questions just to understand what is happening to you. Roaming freely in the streets was every woman's dream. Aunt Habiba's most popular tale, which she narrated on special occasions only, was about the woman with wings, who could fly away from the courtyard whenever she wanted to. Every time Aunt Habiba told that story, the women in the courtyard would tuck their kaftans into their belts and dance away with their arms spread wide as if they were about to fly. Cousin Shama, who was 17, had me confused for years, because she managed to convince me that all women had invisible wings, and that mine would develop too when I was older. Our house gate also protected us from the foreigners standing a few meters away, at another equally busy and dangerous frontier, the one that separated our old city, the Medina, from the new French city, the Ville Nouvelle. My cousins and I would sometimes slip out of the gate, when Ahmed was busy talking or napping, to take a look at the French soldiers. They dressed in blue uniforms, wore rifles on their shoulders, and had small grey eyes that were always alert. They often tried to talk to us children, because the adults never spoke with them, but we were instructed never to answer back. We knew that the French were greedy and had come a long way to conquer our land, even though Allah had already given them a beautiful one, with bustling cities, thick forests, luscious green fields, and cows much bigger than ours that gave 4 times as much milk, but somehow the French needed to get more. Because we lived on the frontier between the old city and the new, we could see how different the French Ville Nouvelle was from our Medina. Their streets were large and straight, and lit by bright lights in the night. Father said that they squandered Allah's energy because people did not need that much bright light in a safe community. They also had fast cars. Our Medina streets were narrow, dark, and serpentine, filled with so many twists and turns that cars could not enter, and foreigners could not find their way out if they ever dared to come in. This was the real reason the French had to build a new city for themselves. They were afraid to live in ours. Most people walked on foot in the Medina. Father and uncle had their mules, but poor people like Ahmed had only donkeys, and children and women had to walk. The French were afraid to walk. They were always in their cars. Even the soldiers would stay in their cars when things got bad. Their fear was quite an amazing thing to us children, because we saw that grown-ups could be as afraid as we could. And these grown-ups who were afraid were on the outside supposedly free. The powerful ones who had created the frontier were also the fearful ones. The Ville Nouvelle was like their harem. Just like women, they could not walk freely in the Medina, so you could be powerful and still be the prisoner of a frontier. Nonetheless, the French soldiers, who often looked so very young, afraid, and lonely at their posts, terrorized the entire Medina. They had power and could hurt us. One day in January 1944, Mother said King Mohammed V, backed by nationalists all over Morocco, went to the top-ranking French colonial administrator, the Resident General, to make a formal demand for independence. The Resident General got very upset. How dare you Moroccans ask for independence? He must have screamed, and to punish us, he launched his soldiers into the Medina. Armored cars forced their way as far as they could into the serpentine streets. People turned to Mecca to pray. Thousands of men recited the anxiety prayer, consisting of one single word repeated over and over for hours when one is faced with disaster. Ya Latif, Ya Latif, Ya Latif. O sensitive one. Ya Latif is one of the 100 names of Allah, and Aunt Habiba often said it was the most beautiful one of all because it described Allah as a source of tender sympathy, who feels your sorrow and can help you. But the armed French soldiers trapped in the narrow street surrounded by the chants of Ya Latif, repeated thousands of times, became nervous and lost control. They started shooting at the praying crowds, and within minutes corpses were falling on top of each other on the mosque's doorstep, while the chants were still going on inside. Mother said that Samir and I were barely 4 at that time, and no one noticed us watching from our gate as the blood-soaked corpses, all dressed in the ceremonial white prayer jilaba, were carried back home. 4 months afterward, you and Samir had nightmares, she said, and you could not even see the color red without running to hide. We had to take you to Moulay Idris sanctuary many Fridays in a row to have the sheriffs, holy men, perform protection rituals over you, and I had to put a Quranic amulet under your pillow for a whole year before you slept normally again. After that tragic day, the French walked around carrying guns with them in plain view all the time, while Father had to ask permission from many different sources just to keep his hunting rifle, and even then had to keep it concealed unless he was in the forest. All these events puzzled me, and I talked about them often with Yasmina, my maternal grandmother, who lived in a beautiful farm with cows and sheep and endless fields of flowers, 100 kilometers to the west of us, between Fez and the ocean. We visited her once a year, and I would talk to her about frontiers and fears and differences, and the why of it all. Yasmina knew a lot about fear, all kinds of fear. I am an expert on fear, Fatima, she would tell me, caressing my forehead as I played with her pearls and pink beads. And I will tell you things when you are older. I will teach you how to get over fears. Often I could not sleep the first few nights on Yasmina's farm. The frontiers were not clear enough. There were no closed gates to be seen anywhere, only wide, flat, open fields where flowers grew and animals wandered peacefully about. But Yasmina explained to me that the farm was part of Allah's original earth, which had no frontiers, just vast, open fields without borders or boundaries, and that I should not be afraid. But how could I walk in an open field without being attacked? I kept asking. And then Yasmina created a game that I loved, to help put me to sleep, called Mshia fil Khla, the walk in the open fields. She would hold me tight as I lay down, and I would clasp her beads with my 2 hands, close my eyes, and imagine myself walking through an endless field of flowers. Step lightly, Yasmina would say. so you can hear the flowers' song. They are whispering, Salam, Salam, peace, peace. I would repeat the flowers' refrain as fast as I could. All danger would disappear, and I would fall asleep. Salam, Salam, murmured the flowers. Yasmina and I. And the next thing I knew, it was morning, and I was lying in Yasmina's big brass bed, with my hands full of pearls and pink beads. From outside came the mixed music of breezes touching the leaves and birds talking to one another, and no one was in the sight but King Farouk, the peacock, and Thor, the fat white duck. Actually, Thor was also the name of Yasmina's most hated co-wife, but I could only call the woman Thor when thinking about her silently to myself. When I said her name out loud, I had to call her Lella Thor. Lella is our title of respect for all important women, just as Sidi is our title of respect for all important men. As a child, I had to call all important grown-ups Lella and Sidi, and kiss their hands at sunset, when the lights were turned on, and we said Msakum, good evening. Every evening, Samira and I would kiss everyone's hand as quickly as we could, so we could return to our games without hearing the nasty remark, tradition is being lost. We got so good at it that we managed to rush through the ritual in an incredible speed. But sometimes we were in such a hurry that we would trip over each other and collapse onto the laps of important people, or even fall down on the carpet. Then everyone would start laughing. Mother would laugh until there were a tear in her eyes. Poor dears, she would say. They're already tired of kissing hands, and it is only the beginning. But Lella Thor on the farm, just like Lella Mani in Fez, never laughed. She was always very serious, proper and correct. As the first wife of Grandfather Tazi, she had a very important position in the family. She also had no housekeeping duties and was very rich, two privileges that Yasmina could not abide. I could not care how much rich this woman is, she would say. She ought to be working like all the rest of us. Are we Muslims or not? If we are, everyone is equal. Allah said so. His Prophet preached the same. Yasmina said that I should never accept inequality, for it was not logical. That was why she named her fat white duck Lella Thor.